Our Violent Ends, Chapter 6. The second floor of the tea house had been booked out tonight for the Scarlet's Inner Circle meeting. All its square tables were pushed to the wall, making way for the large round one installed right in the center of the space. Juliet thought it looked like a barricade. She took a sip of her tea, peering over the rim while she eyed the setup, weary that some poor waiter was going to trek up the stairs to check on the Scarlets only to ram right into the table that was blocking the end of the stairs. All the windows had been left untouched, though for the tea houses like this, window was hardly the right word when they never installed glass. They were merely closed using wooden shutters, drawn when the tea house went dark for the night, and pulled open during its operating hours. The frigid cold blew in every so often, but alcohol was flowing at the table and the oil lamps in the center were buzzing with warmth. Still, for whatever reason, Juliet's eyes kept being pulled back to the barricade of tables pressed to the walls, and then up, where the walls gave way for the rectangular cutouts that led in the night. And here there was the illusion of comfort and safety. But all that stood between them and the lurking unknown was a thin tea-house wall. All that stood between them and 5 monsters prowling the city was, well, nothing, really. Juliet. Lord Kai's summons drew Juliet's attention back to the scarlet dinner, to the cigar smoke that wafted in gray plumes above them and the clinking of chopsticks upon porcelain bowls. Her father tipped his chin at her, indicating that he was finished with his agenda and she could speak now, as she had requested earlier today. Juliet set her teacup down and stood. The tablecloth stirred, but before it could get caught on her dress, Rosalind reached over and yanked it down. "Thanks," Juliet whispered. Rosalind responded by flicking a single grain of rice off the tablecloth, aiming it at the seats directly across from them. She almost hit Tyler, although he wouldn't have noticed a puny piece of rice landing in his lap when he was eyeing Juliet so intently. Perhaps it was only his bruised nose causing the scrunch in his expression. Perhaps he was already preparing himself for a fight, and the distaste was showing through. "Here," from Rosalind's other side. Kathleen passed a stack of papers she had been holding on to. Juliet received the papers, then set them carefully down the spinning glass, on an empty spot right between the sauce-cooked crabs and the smoked fish. "I'm sure by now you have all heard about the attack on the White Flowers." The table hushed at the mention of White Flowers. "And I'm sure you've wondered if we are to be next, again at the mercy of another monster." Juliet spun the glass. The feast swirled under the lights, shimmering green King Kai, deep brown Huang Shu and the plain black and white ink of what could save them. "This is the last vestige of research that Paul Dexter left behind. You might also know him as the former Larkspur, now dead from my bullet." Juliet drew taller. Through her spine was already as straight as a blade. "It may be some time before we can stop whoever has resurrected his work. But in the meantime, I propose we use his work. We allocate our resources toward research, mass-produce a vaccine, and distribute it through the whole city." Now came the part where Juliet actually needed support, past merely making a case with her father. "For free." Eyebrows shot up immediately, teacups freezing halfway to mouths as Scarlets stalled and blinked, wondering if they had misheard her. "It is a preemptive measure before the Scarlet Gang can be attacked," Juliet hurried to explain. "Regardless of who you are, Scarlet or White Flower, nationalist or communist or non-affiliated, if we all stand immune to the madness, then whichever fool is trying to play at the new Larkspurs loses every shred of power, in one fell swoop. We protect the city and keep everything the way it is, at no threat from the destroyer." "I have an alternate proposal." Tyler stood. He rested his knuckles on the table before him, his body relaxed, an utterly casual picture compared to Juliet's stiff composure. Rosalind leaned forward. "Why don't you—" "Rosalind, don't," Kathleen hissed, closing a hand on her sister's shoulder. Lips thinning, Rosalind sat back down, and Tyler went on as if nothing had happened. "If we can truly create a vaccine, it is in our best interest to charge anyone who is not a Scarlet. The Larkspur was fool in many things, but in this, he was not. The people are scared. They will do anything for a solution." "Absolutely not," Juliet snapped, before any of the Scarlets could decide that Tyler's interruption meant their opinion should be heard by the whole table too. "This is not a show ticket. This is a vaccine that decides between life and death." "And what about it?" Tyler asked. You wish for us to protect the white flowers? Protect the foreigners who do not even see us as people? The last time the madness went around, Juliet, they did not care until it was them who were dying. Because a Chinese collapsing on the streets may as well be an animal. I know! Juliet inhaled sharply, regaining her poise. She had to get her points in quick. Her mother's jaw was tight, watching the argument spiral, and if it deteriorated any further, Lady Kai was going to shut this down. Juliet breathed out, let the brief silence ebb around her, so that she was in control of the conversation and not desperately chasing the end of it. It is not about extending our kindness to those in the city who don't deserve it, she said. It is about mass protection. Tyler pushed off from the table and plopped back into a seat. He hung an arm around the back of his chair while Juliet remained standing. Why do we need mass production? Tyler asked, scoffing. Let us make money. Let us rise so ependariously to the top that we are untouchable. And then, as we have always done, we extend protection to our people, to the Scarlets. Everyone else falling away matters not. Everyone else dying out is our advantage. You would be risking Scarlet lives in the process. You cannot guarantee their safety like that. Despite her unflinching insistence, Juliet could feel her credibility slipping away. She was trying to stake her logic on the sanctity of that one life saved as something worthy of all sacrifice, but this was the Scarlet Gang. And the Scarlet Gang did not care for much sentimental notions. One of the Scarlets, seated beside Lord Kai, cleared his throat. Seeing that it was Mr. Ping, who Juliet usually liked, she looked to him and nodded, prompting him to go on. Where is the funding going to come from? Mr. Ping asked. He winced. Surely not us. Juliet threw her hands up. Why else would she bother to stand here, bleeding the advantages of a free vaccine, if not for the funds of the Scarlet Gang's inner circle? We can afford it. Mr. Ping's eyes darted around the table. He mopped his damp forehead. We are not a charity for the weak and poor. This is a city built on labor, Juliet said coldly. If madness tears through the streets once again, we are only as safe as the weakest and poorest. They fall and we fall too. Do you forget who runs our factories? Do you forget how our shops open every morning? The table fell silent, but nobody jumped to start in their acknowledgement of her point. They merely shifted their gazes away and remained mum, until the silence extended for long enough that Lady Kai was forced to tap her fingers on the spinning glass and say, Juliet, take a seat, would you? Perhaps this would be a better discussion once we actually make a vaccine. A beat later, Lord Kai nodded his agreement. Yes, we shall decide if this research proves useful. Run to the lab in Qinghuangmiao tomorrow and see where we can find it. Begrudgingly, Juliet nodded her acceptance of the decision and eased back to her seat. Her mother was quick to change the topic and put the Scarlets at ease again. As Juliet reached for the teapot, her eyes met Tyler's across the table and he grinned. Allez, souris, he said. His fast switch into French was to prevent the other Scarlets from understanding him, save for Rosalind and Kathleen. But without even knowing what he was saying, anyone could tell by his manner, his expression, his tone that he was goading Juliet and announcing his victory in a tug-of-war for favor. The simple fact that he had not been shot down on an idea that went starkly against Juliet's, that her parents seemed to consider it on an equal basis. Indeed, Tyler had won. Je te vu, Juliet snapped. What? Tyler shot back, still in French. You're warning me of what, dearest cousin? It took everything in Juliet not to pick up her teacup and throw it at him. Stop playing God upon my plans. Stop intruding upon matters that have naught to do with you. Your plans are always flawed. I'm just trying to help you out, Tyler interrupted. His smile fell, and Juliet tensed, reading immediately what was coming next. Look at how your last one turned out. And your whole time tricking the White Flower heir. What information did you gather from him? Under the table, Juliet dug her long nails hard into her palms, releasing all her tension through her hands so that her expression would not give her away. He suspected. He had always suspected, long before she told her lie at that hospital. But then Juliet had shot Marshall Seho, and Tyler had had to reevaluate his instincts, unable to align why she would have killed Marshall if she was truly Roma Montagov's lover. Except Marshall was alive. And all along, Tyler had been right. But if he knew this, then Juliet's role as the heiress was over, and Tyler would not even have to lead a coup. He only had to tell the truth, and the Scarlets would fall in line behind him. "You ruined my plan, Tyler," Juliet said evenly. "You forced me to give myself away too early. I worked so hard to gain his trust, and I had to throw it away lest you misunderstood me. You're lucky I haven't tattled to my parents about your uselessness." Tyler's eyes narrowed. His gaze flickered to Lord and Lady Kai, realizing that her parents did not have the full picture of the hospital, just like the rest of the city. It would have been impossible to keep the rumors away from them, but as far as they knew, Juliet and Tyler had shown up to that White Flower confrontation as a united force. The thought was almost laughable, but it didn't raise questions. "Lucky," Tyler echoed. "Sure, Juliet." With a brief shake of his head, he turned away, engaging with the aunt beside him in Shanghainese. Juliet, however, couldn't lapse back into the casual socializing at the table. Her ears were a roar of noise, head buzzing with a threat lining every word of that conversation. There were goosebumps all along her neck, and even as she pulled her dress tighter around herself, clutching at the fur around her throat, she could not fool herself into thinking that it was merely the cold blowing in. It was fear. She was deathly afraid of the power Tyler held over her after what he had witnessed at that hospital. Because he was right. He really did have a reason to uproot her. Tyler would do all in his power to ensure the survival of the Scarlet Gang, while Juliet no longer had a single desire to be fighting the blood feud, not when it was so damn pointless. Let them both voice their truths to Lord Kai, and who would he choose to be heir? Juliet reached for the liquor bottle, passing on the spinning glass, and poured a splash into her teacup. Without caring who was watching her, she choked it down. "You're hitting too high." Roma jabbed Elisa in the armpit, and she yelped, darting back several steps. Her scowl was half-hearted, shoulders coming up to her ears as she hunched into herself. Roma resisted his sigh, only because he knew Elisa would be annoyed if he seemed irritated by her slow progress. "You said you were teaching me self-defense," she grumbled, smoothing down her hair. "I am." "You're just—" Elisa waved her arms waved her under her hands, trying to imitate Roma's fast movements. "It's not very helpful." A breeze floated in from Elisa's window, and Roma walked toward it, pulling down the pane to keep the cold out. He didn't say anything as he huffed a breath into the glass. He only blew until there was considerable mist, and then with his finger he drew a little face that was smiling. "Is that supposed to be motivating?" Elisa asked, watching over his shoulder. He reached over to pinch her cheeks. "It's supposed to be you, tiny and annoying." Elisa smacked his hands away. "Roma!" It wasn't that he didn't like spending time with his sister, but he had a suspicion she was asking for these lessons only to distract him from his other tasks. And it wasn't that he didn't like hanging around with his sister instead of tending to his other tasks, but he was also sure the little scamp had schemed this up only to prevent him from guarding their territory lines, not because she actually wanted to learn how to punch an attacker. "This is very important, you know," Elisa said now, as if she could sense where his train of thought was going. "I was in a coma for so long. I cannot be weak. I must know how to punch bad men." A thump came through the floor. It was either a sitting room in the house growing too raucous, or someone in the level below, throwing knives at the wall. Roma heaved an exhale, then positioned Elisa, making her hold her arms out. "Okay, try again then. Keep your fist tight." Elisa tried again, and again, and again. No matter what she did, her blocks were flimsy, and her efforts at striking Roma when he pretended to grab her were soft and wobbly. "Why don't we stop here?" Roma said eventually. "No!" Elisa exclaimed. She stamped her foot down. "You haven't taught me how to hit, or shoot, or catch a knife?" "Catch a—" Roma trailed off, flabbergasted. "Why do you want to— You know what? Never mind." He shook his head. "Alishoshka, no one learns how to fight in one day." Elisa folded her arms, storming over to her bed and collapsing in a fury of movement. Her sheets flew up and settled down around her like a white aura. "I bet Juliet learned how to fight in one day," she grumbled. Roma froze. He felt his blood flash hot. then cold, then somehow both at once. A simultaneous broiling fury paired with a frozen fear just at the mere sound of her name. "You shouldn't want to be anything like Juliet," he snapped. He wanted to believe it. If he said it enough times, maybe he would. Maybe he could look past the illusions she glimmered with, look underneath the wide eyes as she blinked at him even as she spilled blood at his feet. No matter how brightly she shone, Juliet's heart had turned as charred as coal. "I know," Elisa muttered, matching Roma's tone. She was grumpy now because it sounded like Roma was grumpy at her, and Roma swallowed his anger, knowing it was misdirected. It prickled at him and that he had become so easily irritable, and yet he couldn't stop himself. The red-hot urge to be terrible was always pulling at his skin, easier to slip into than ignore. Roma rolled up his sleeves, checking the clock on her mantel. Elisa seemed content to have a little brooding moment, so he walked over and poked her belly. "I'm needed elsewhere. We can pick up another time." "Okay," another low grumble, her arms folded tightly. "Don't die." His brows lifted. He'd expected Elisa to protest, to ask why he needed to be on the streets watching their territory lines, but all these months singing the same tune had tired her out. "I won't." He prodded her again. "Practice your stances." Roma left her room, closing the door behind himself. The fourth floor was quieter than usual, void of the thumping that had been heard earlier. Perhaps they too had tired of trying to learn how to throw a knife. I bet Juliet learned how to fight in one day. Damn Juliet. It wasn't enough that she had to occupy his thoughts sunken into his very bones. It wasn't enough that she had to appear in the city everywhere he needed to go, trailing him like a shadow. She had to come into his home, as well grace across Whiteflower lips, like the final frontier of her invasion. "Where are you off to?" Roma's stride didn't stop as he came off the stairs. "That would be none of your business." "Wait," Dmitri demanded. Roma didn't need to. Nothing was preventing him from treating Dmitri Voronin however he wished, turning the tables until the whole house was dizzy, because Dmitri Voronin had gotten comfortable as the favorite, and now Roma had decided he wanted the whole Scarlet Gang dead after all. So many years spent trying to balance being the heir and being good, and with one snap of his fingers, the goodness gave way for violence. And Lord Montagov had liked the look of it. Being a Whiteflower was about playing the game. And Roma was finally playing. "What is it?" Roma asked dully, making an exaggerated show of slowing down and turning around. Dmitri, who was sitting on one of the plush green couches, started forward curiously, his fingers tapping on the back of the couch, one foot resting against his other knee. "Your father wants your audience," Dmitri reported. He flashed an easy smile. A lock of black hair fell forward into his face. "Whenever you're ready. He has some matters to discuss." Roma's eyes darted up, following another outburst of sound within the house, the ceiling shifting and trembling from some second-floor commotion. It might be coming from his father's office. "He can be patient," Roma said. With Dimitri's gaze still pinned on him, Roma pulled the front door wide open and swept outside.